Hello, crew and Nikki. I just had the pleasure of watching all of your videos this evening. I was pleasantly surprised. It always makes me happy when I go to YouTube and I see videos from you guys. So I really appreciate that you guys make those videos because it makes my day when I get to see you guys. So thanks. And Nikki, don't feel, yeah, the whole video thing, to me, it's one of those things where it shouldn't feel like an obligation. It should be something that's fun and you enjoy doing. And if it feels like it's becoming an obligation, it needs to change and we need to not do it. So don't feel obligated. That said, Nikki, I guess since you've decided I'm a sadist, you should feel guilty about not making videos. And I hope that you're suffering with pangs of guilt for making so few videos. Don't call me sadist. Nikki, actually, you're talking about how you're risk averse, and I am completely risk averse as well. And I have, I like to think of it more of as a vivid imagination rather than fear of heights. Several examples in my life of growing, when I was in elementary school, we went to Elitch Gardens in Colorado, Denver, which is a amusement park, was an amusement park, I'm not sure if it's still there. Had a big old roller coaster, and my friends guilt-tripped me and peer pressured me into going on it with them, and I did not want to go. And I got in the car and it started cranking up, and one of the most traumatizing experiences of my life. And it's that long anticipatory climb up the thing, and I was trying to figure out how to get out of the car the whole way up. I was like scrambling. It was scary. And so got up and went down the top, and I was just terrified the whole time. I was terrified I was going to fall out of the car. I was terrified I was going to die. And just really traumatized, and I've never gone on a roller coaster since then. Just don't have a desire to. But the other thing that Nikki, with the management team, we went on a retreat a few years ago and did a ropes course, and same kind of thing. And one of the exercises we did was you get harnessed up and you have two ropes holding you and pulleys, and there was a wire 40 feet above the ground between two trees, and there's another wire about probably 15 feet above that one with ropes hanging down off it, so you couldn't get from one to the other without letting go. And you're supposed to cross this wire. It's probably 50 feet across. I was one of the younger members of the management team, definitely in better shape than just about everybody else there. And so there were two ways up and down the two trees. And one had like wooden planks that you climbed up, steps. I guess there were staples in the tree, so it was pretty easy. The other side had a rope ladder. And I thought, everybody had gone up the other way. I thought, I'll go up the rope ladder. And I wasn't nervous at all, thinking, because, I'm strapped into this harness. So I get on the rope ladder and I just go up the rope ladder without even thinking about it. And so I climb up there, I get to the top, and I'm transferring from the rope ladder to this wire. And I turn around and look down, and all of a sudden, I was just terrified. And my legs started shaking, and my legs wouldn't move, and it was one of these things. It's like, I know I'm strapped into this thing. I could just let go, and actually, that's what they had you do, was walk across, walk back to the middle, and then let your team lower you down. But it was this visceral reaction that I had no control over at that moment, and I'm sitting there, and because I started on the other side, the dangling ropes were closer on the far side. So the first thing I had to do was let go of this tree and go, I couldn't reach the next rope. So I was going to have to try to get across this without, having anything to hold on to. and it was only like a foot from my hand, or maybe 2 feet, but it just freaked me out, and it was really challenging. So I'm completely with you on that. And Carew will tell you stories about when we were in Maine at Acadia National Park, and we went up. I don't know if I told you this, when we were climbing up the rock, and we got about 2/3 of the way up, and I was like, I can't do this anymore. I'm gonna have to traverse and go around. Yeah. So that's a long story, but yeah. Along with you talked about my song that I wrote, and Nikki, I know that you were an intellectual snob in high school. I know you're an extremely intelligent woman, and I'm disappointed by your effort. And I can only say that you clearly don't care, and that's completely okay. Yes, that was that's like looking at that song and saying it's about a ballerina is like saying Moby Dick is about a whale. Come on, we're talking about an incredible work of art here. Step up. Jeez. You talked about your grandmother. I'll come back to that because Carew had a long soliloquy about that as well. The whole Go USA thing. Did you say you like to think of Carew as an ass in a swimsuit? That's why you like the Go USA thing? I think of Carew as an ass all the time, but I don't know if I can get behind that either. So, on to Carew. Carew, I'm glad to hear how your kids are doing with their running. And I'm glad you're going to work at 8 o'clock at night to run reports. No, not really. Really the only thing that you were talking about Nikki's grandmother, and becoming older and having fewer things that you can do. And, it was interesting to me that you framed what was happening with Nikki's grandmother as people taking her freedoms away. And I don't know that it's fair to frame it that way. We went through this with my mom's parents, and my grandfather in particular, and we never, he lived with my mom and dad for 2 years, and that whole time he was, he would just get out and start walking down the street. He had no idea where he was. He would talk about people who weren't alive. He couldn't call me by my name, and somehow the idea that people went and got him and brought him back to the house when he wandered off, that somehow they're taking his freedoms away. I think that it would be really interesting for you to think about the concept of freedom, because all these ideas, the idea of freedom is something that we have constructed and is highly cultural, and there's a whole bunch of real subjective values built around that idea. And I find it really interesting that you see caring for people who are mentally incapable of caring for themselves as an infringement on their freedoms. I think that's an interesting way to frame that. I'm not saying it's right or it's wrong, but I think you can, if you frame it that way, it's unquestionably a bad thing. But I don't think it is unquestionably a bad thing. And I also don't think, so one of the things from the time I was 20 years old, I've thought a lot about is that I'm likely to, because of my history with concussions and the family history for dementia, that I'm likely to experience dementia when I get older. And, and actually, Ron, Sarah's dad, experienced dementia to some degree, through his medical, decline. Even though he had cancer, and it's like we weren't ready for that. They went in, they did surgery on the cancer, and he came out, and he was never back to who he had been before. And a lot of that, I spent a lot of time and wrote some songs about that when I was in my early 20s. I spent a lot of time thinking about that. And thinking about who we are and what makes us who we are. And before my experience with my grandfather, I always thought of myself as my intellect. Who my brain and my mind was who I was. But then, since my grandfather had always, so he's 91 years old, and he's finally reached a point where he can't live in his own house with his wife. He needs somebody else to take care of him because he's doing things that are going to hurt her and hurt him. I think of life as an arc, and I think that, you can either focus on, one of the things that I feel I need to do in living my life is mature to the point where I recognize what's important and what's not. And, I'm not there, and I think everybody has to come to those conclusions on their own. But for me, part of it is recognizing that part of being a human is going through that physical decline where I can no longer do everything I want to do, and recognizing that that's not important and it's not inherent to who I am, and it doesn't have to be a soul-destroying experience to lose that. It can be a growth experience. And Sal Purith, Carew knows Sal, she was a witness at our wedding, an old family friend. She once said to me, everybody dies, and it happens to everybody, so how can it be a bad thing? And I think that the value judgments associated with getting older and going through physical decline and the processes that lead to our eventual demise are processes that as a society we don't do a good job talking about. And I know, Carew, it's probably hard to talk about this with Galen's death, recently, and it's probably not fair to me to wax philosophical about this, but I honestly try to apply this stuff in my life. And when I spent time taking care of Ron when he was ill, and sitting up with him all night after his surgery when he couldn't sleep, and it was the day before, they took him into intensive care. I stayed up with him all night and sat there and held his hand and talked with him, and he didn't know who I was part of the time, and he kept saying things about the air conditioner in the house, and but having the ability to sit there and with this human being who's a former president of an institution, had a PhD from Columbia, incredibly intelligent, loving, caring person, and now because his physical existence was falling apart, didn't have the tools to deal with it. And I don't know that, it may well be that thinking that we can have the tools to deal with it is a fallacy. But, I think that's part of the arc of life, learning to recognize our decline and not, in the United States, we do this thing where we really worship youth, and we worship this mythical freedom that we have, which means actually freedom from all constraints, but not freedom from when you start getting into that discussion of what freedom is, it's fraught with paradoxes. So I don't know. I just think that it's worth trying to think about it in different terms. And I've read, forgive me for going into this, Nikki, but in the Baha'i faith there's a lot of writings about freedom and the nature of the soul and the nature of humanity, and I find that a lot of that is fairly well aligned with contemporary philosophical thought that I had to deal with in grad school, and I just think that it's better. There's a point where the freedom that we have comes from recognizing our limits and recognizing the context within which we are existing and trying to work within that context. You know, we're not free from the laws of nature. So, you know, the greatest freedom we can experience is to recognize the laws of nature and learn how to exist within those laws in a way that's going to make our lives easiest. And so as our bodies break down and as our minds break down, that's part of that process, you know. So, you know, part of, I would say, and you know, I've said this before, Chris probably heard this, true freedom is the absolute adherence to the divine laws of nature. You know, it's learning how the world works and learning how to move and work within that world, and part of that is constant change. Anyway, I've gone on way too long about this. When I put up this video, actually I took video of Gareth running laps at soccer practice today. Don't know why, but I had my phone and did it. So I'm actually probably going to put this video up so you don't have to watch me talking, and maybe I've gone on too long. This will be a long video, but I hope you guys are continuing to do well, and I hope you're not offended by my philosophical ravings. And Karoo, I want to know what the song's about. It's not about a whale.